area. Limit your exposure, stay inside, windows and doors closed.
The story begins with a woman named Ava, who is a model for a famous magazine in the United States and the daughter of a U.S. state governor. She plans to go on vacation with her boyfriend, Jed, who has invited his friend Kyle along. However, Jed is not happy about Ava's bodyguard, Brandon, joining them on the trip. Despite Ava being grown up now, her father insists on Brandon's presence. Since her mother's death in an accident, her father has become very protective of her. Ava assures Jed that Brandon is only there to protect her and won't interfere with their vacation. On the way to the plane, Ava shares that she plans to drop out of law school. At the same time, we are introduced to a little girl named Rosa, who is also going on vacation with her grandparents. While heading to the plane, Rosa loses her teddy bear. Fortunately, Ava finds it and returns it to Rosa, who is very grateful. While waiting for the plane, Brandon feels that Jed and Kyle are unhappy with his presence, believing he will ruin their vacation. However, Brandon is simply following orders from Ava's father. Moreover, he doesn't want to repeat the same mistake, as he wasn't able to save Ava's mother from drowning because he wasn't with her at the time. Nonetheless, Brandon promises Ava that he won't interfere with her vacation. Shortly, the plane is ready to depart and the passengers begin boarding. Since there aren't many passengers, Ava and her companions choose to sit at the very back, while Brandon sits at the front. As usual, before takeoff, passengers are given instructions on how to fasten their seatbelts and use life vests. However, Kyle and Jed start mocking a flight attendant named Danilo. Ava tries to stop them, but they don't listen, which frustrates Danilo. The plane then takes off, and the flight attendants begin serving drinks to the passengers. Once again, Kyle bothers Danilo while he's working, prompting a frustrated Danilo to deliberately spill the drink Kyle had ordered.
Shit. Okay, did you just...
In the midst of the fog, Ava wondered why the plane they were on was so empty. However, Kyle jokingly said that the plane they were on was very old and unfit for use, so they might as well crash. Hearing that, Ava was briefly frightened, but Jed reassured her, saying that what Kyle talked about would never happen. But soon after, the plane experienced a disturbance that jolted the passengers. The pilot quickly informed them that everything was fine, because a flock of birds had just flown past the plane. However, the pilot's statement was incorrect, as the plane's left engine was severely damaged after hitting the flock of birds, causing the plane to fall and sustain severe damage. Some passengers were thrown out, and eventually, the plane crashed into the ocean. The plane continued to sink until it finally reached the ocean floor. Fortunately, some passengers survived, and the rear part of the plane had not yet filled with water. Brandon also survived and saved Grandma Rosa. However, Brandon was pierced by a piece of metal during the impact. Grandma Rosa, who was unconscious, was given first aid by Danilo, and she eventually regained consciousness. Jet and Kyle were both very frightened, especially since Kyle's broken arm made him even more panicked. With his knowledge, Brandon tried to warn the passengers to stay calm so that the remaining oxygen could last longer. He also asked Danilo to check the rear of the plane to ensure it was safe from water pressure. There was no way out except to wait for help, as it would be dangerous to exit through the hole in the plane's body. Moreover, the pilot had surely contacted the tower if they had crashed, and help would definitely come. However, their main problem was the limited oxygen. Fortunately, Grandma Rosa had seen a passenger using an oxygen tank, which was likely still in the front of the plane. With no other choice, Brandon went to the front of the plane to retrieve the needed oxygen. But after obtaining the oxygen, misfortune struck him. A large shark attacked Brandon, causing him severe injuries. Unfortunately, just as they were about to give him oxygen, the shark pulled Brandon away and he was ultimately eaten. Brandon's death left everyone terrified and unsure of what to do next. However, Ava followed Brandon's instructions to wait for help until the designated time. Then, Grandma Rosa, a former military nurse, immediately treated Kyle's broken arm. Using makeshift tools, she managed to set his arm, causing him immense pain. Meanwhile, a helicopter was deployed to search the ocean, focusing on the last known location of the plane. Inside the plane, the deep ocean pressure was starting to damage the plane's frame, and they still had no other plan but to wait for help. Jet became increasingly panicked, fearing they would run out of oxygen if they didn't leave soon. However, all they could do was wait helplessly, as a swarm of sharks was lurking outside the plane. They soon saw remains from the front part of the plane, suggesting that the sharks had eaten the bodies of the passengers who had already died. The intense water pressure continued to damage the plane's frame, making Jet, an engineering graduate, quite scared because the plane's structure couldn't withstand the pressure much longer. According to Ava's estimate, the oxygen in the plane would last for about 3 hours. Shortly after, the seabed could no longer support the heavy weight of the plane, causing a landslide and making the plane fall even deeper. The current conditions do not allow for waiting for help, as the ground structure is not as strong as they thought. The only way out is to swim. Rosa then suggested scaring the shark with bubbles, as her school teacher explained that sharks are afraid of bubbles. Kyle also remembered seeing one of the passengers carrying surfing gear, which should help them all get out of there. The situation is putting a lot of pressure on Ava, as she fears drowning just like her mother. But Ava tries to stay strong and convince herself that she will survive. At the same time, a rescue helicopter finally finds the last known location of the plane crash, and they immediately send 2 professional divers to search the area. The divers begin their search and eventually find the wreckage of the plane and several passengers who have survived. However, unbeknownst to them, a shark is lurking and suddenly devours both divers. The divers become an easy meal for the shark. Meanwhile, the rescue helicopter decides to return to base because the divers have not returned, and the helicopter is running low on fuel. With no hope left, Ava plans to take the oxygen tanks from the dead divers inside the plane, which they will use to swim out. But an unexpected event occurs when Jed, who slips, is suddenly attacked by the shark that is already inside, severing his leg.
Over this way, Ava! Ava, over this way!
After that, they all tried to stop the bleeding in Jed's leg. Of course, this made Jed desperate, as it could ruin his career as a track athlete. Seeing her boyfriend's condition, Ava tried to calm Jed down, because otherwise, he would lose strength and quickly use up the remaining oxygen. With no other choice, Ava bravely decided to retrieve the surfing gear that was under the plane. Ava searched carefully until she finally found it. After getting the surfing equipment, Ava was deeply saddened because Jed eventually died from blood loss. Ava was devastated to lose another loved one. There was no time to grieve. They had to leave immediately because their plane could collapse at any moment. This time, they planned to use bubbles from life vests to scare the shark if it approached them. Kyle still doubted whether he could do it because he couldn't hold his breath for long, especially with his injured hand. But Ava reassured him, encouraging Kyle to try to get out despite his injury. They all then prepared to use the diving gear, while the plane's frame continued to deteriorate due to the high water pressure. In short, after getting ready, another problem arose as the front part of the plane started to break off, causing the aircraft to become unbalanced. Once they felt the area was safe, Ava and Rosa quickly went to the passenger area to retrieve the divers' oxygen tanks. After finding them, the two took turns getting oxygen while waiting for the others, who were still at the back of the plane. Meanwhile, the remaining three tried to catch up. Unfortunately, Grandma Rosa decided not to go, fearing she would be a burden. She only wanted her granddaughter to be safe. Eventually, the plane's body collapsed, killing Grandma Rosa. As they tried to escape, a shark that had already entered the plane attacked, killing Kyle, which left Danilo with no choice but to leave him. Only Ava, Danilo, and Rosa were left. They prepared to escape. Danilo and Rosa went first, with Ava following. Suddenly, the plane sank deeper, and a group of sharks began entering the plane, forcing Ava to navigate carefully until she finally escaped. Upon reaching the surface, Ava was taken by the rescue helicopter, where Danilo and Rosa were already waiting for her arrival. In the end, only the three of them survived, and Rosa tried to find peace after losing her grandparents. The film ends with this scene.